Hi, this is Ms. Hadi. We're going to continue our discussion of causes of World War I, and we're going to pick up with inflexible diplomatic alliances. So these are agreements of mutual defense, meaning I have your back, you have mine. If somebody attacks me, you'll defend me. If somebody attacks you, I'll defend you. And unfortunately, that's going to take something that could have been a small conflict and lead to a chain reaction that involves many people and many countries, rather, and makes something small very, very large. On one side, you have the Triple Alliance, also called the Central Powers because they're in the center of Europe. It starts off as a dual pact between Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then later it's joined by the Italians. But the Italians aren't consistent. They're going to flip-flop. They're there because they're trying to aggrandize their power in the world and pick up land, and they're not going to be as cemented in the alliance. So again, these are called the Central Powers as well. So make sure you write that down in your notes. Sorry that it's kind of squiggly. And then on the one that sounds French is the one that has France in it. It's called the Triple Entente, and it initially starts off as an alliance between Russia, France, and the United Kingdom. Sometimes we'll just call the United Kingdom Britain or England. It means the same thing. Because the United States eventually will join this side, we're going to call this side also the Allies. That can be confusing for some students because it sounds like alliance, so they get confused, right? But don't get confused. Allies means friends. And since the U.S. is going to eventually join this side, that's the side that we're on, right, with our friends, not the Central Powers Alliance side. Okay, so the next thing that's going to confuse you, and I apologize, is the company that made these PowerPoint slides, the Traditions and Encounters textbook people, they made a small mistake here. This was meant to say Central Powers. So these are the concern of the Central Powers, not the Entente. Remember, Entente sounds French, it's the one with France in it. So this is basically like what brought these different states together. So obviously, there's a lot of cultural similarities between the German and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Another reason why they joined this alliance was that Germany was terrified of a two-front war, meaning fighting on two sides, being encircled. They didn't want to have to fight France, which hated them. We'll talk about why in a second, and potentially have to deal with an attack by Russia or others. So they're also worried about English domination of the sea. We talked about the dreadnoughts earlier. I mentioned that they were worried about a French attack. They're worried about a French attack because Germany became a state late. It became a state in 1871, largely because of the policies of Otto von Bismarck. Otto von Bismarck picked a war with France, and the result of that war, the Franco-Prussian War, because Prussia used to be a big German state, was Germany is going to become a more powerful state, right? It's going to be able to unify, and France is going to weaken as a world power. So the balance of powers changes in terms of France losing power, has diminished power. So the French never quite forgave the Germans for this, and were hostile towards the Germans. And the Austro-Hungarian Empire is really interested in having a free hand in the Balkans without worrying about Russian meddling or interference, and support of Slavic independence and all of that. Okay. So on the side of the Triple Entente, so this is wrong, it's not the alliance, but the Entente, you have the concerns of the other side. So Russia is worried about the fact that the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians have banded together, and they're going to be very strong, and they're neighbors. So you have a very strong state that could attack you next to you. So that makes them nervous and want to enter into an alliance for protection. The United Kingdom / Great Britain is also worried about them maintaining the balance of powers because, of course, they're the strongest country in the world at that time. They don't want that to change. And they don't like that Germany is becoming stronger industrially and having more colonies and all of that. France is worried about hostilities with Germany for obvious reasons. We just talked about the Franco-Prussian War. So they signed this military pact with reciprocal treaty obligations in the summer of 1914. And both sides draw up these mutually threatening war plans that are very much based on acting quickly and on attack. Very little forethought about potentially having to do defense, not thinking about the new technologies that potentially are going to cause lots of casualties. On the French side, you have the French Plan 17, which has your book, talks about it being summed up in one word: attack. It's all about attack, attack, attack. Then you have the German Schlieffen Plan or Schleifen Plan. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but this is based off of Germany's fear of encirclement. The idea is that it would take longer for Russia to mobilize, to get all of their, gear and people to where they needed to basically be ready to attack. So because they don't want to be encircled, the idea is attack France, knock out France first, then turn around and give your attention to Russia, which will have taken longer to mobilize. Now, enacting these plans is conditional or based on the mobilization of enemy forces. So basically, if Germany sees, that Russia or France are mobilizing, it means you need to act quickly. There is no waiting. There is no talking it out or having diplomacy.